sir, you're correct. We will just wait for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Or either,
Yeah.
sir, we can start. They will keep joining, sir.
Okay, that's also fine.
Oh,
Okay,
sure.
great. Thank you so much. Welcome all of you, and I hope most of you were there in the morning sessions, but I do see a few names whom I don't recognize. So just as a little summary of what we did since morning, the first thing that we did in the morning was go through John Maxwell DISC personality indicator, which is an assessment to identify the various personality types that we can be. So through that, we were able to identify, we did small little exercises to identify who around us was a D, who was an I, who was an S, and who was a C. The 4 distinct personality types, so that we are able to understand people around us better. And as we can understand their strengths and their methodologies of communication and what they prefer, we could then also change our methodologies of communicating with them in a more effective way. Also through that, we were able to identify which of these characteristics we connected with. Were we dominant? Were we influence? Were we C? What is a C? Anybody remembers? What was a C? What was the C in a DISC? Dominant, influence. C was
Compliant,
what?
compliant.
Compliant.
Compliance,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Compliant.
Compliance.
Yeah. And what was a DISC? S?
Steadiness.
Steadiness.
Right. So these are the 4 ones that we talked about. And each one of us was able to identify at least 2 of them, which connected with the personality type that we had. We also identified what is the kind of communication we should be doing with each one of them, so as to be able to make connections with them in a more deeper way at a human level, and thereby collaborate with them in a more effective manner. So that was the first thing that we did. We also had a fantastic question asked by somebody who said, what is your opinion about psychometric tests and how effective are they? So in my opinion, the opinion I gave, I said there are 2 kinds of test assessments that people can take. One is a psychometric assessment, which is basically a self-assessment of oneself. And the second is a 360-degree assessment, which fundamentally means that I ask people around me, what are the behaviors they see in me, and what are the behaviors they would like to see more in me. And I said both of them have their own relevance. Psychometric tests are easy to accept by people because in a psychometric assessment, you cannot blame anybody else for the results that you get. And you can't say, I didn't understand myself. So psychometric generally brings out what you feel about yourself, and it also puts you in a slot. But as I always say, none of us can ever be put into a slot because we are so unique. So we may be following certain elements of that slot, but we will never be completely into that slot. And one thing we should always remember is, irrespective of the slot you put me in, if I so desire to improve, and if I have that passion in me to improve myself, I can improve and certainly get better. So that slot is the state that I am in, but it does not stop me to improve myself. A 360 degrees for more matured people. Because when people tell me about me, I need a lot of maturity for me to accept what people are saying. And that is where this one sentence comes up every time in my brain, is perception is reality. I have to agree to the fact that what people perceive me as is what I am. Because I can get on the roof and keep shouting, I'm patient, I'm patient, I'm patient. But if people around me see me as impatient, then obviously there are certain behaviors that I'm demonstrating which I'm not aware of. And these are the blind spots that really come out from a 360-degree assessment. So both have their relevance. After having gone through that, then we went to another fantastic Marshall Goldsmith program known as Triggers. And the 3 to 4 big key takeaways from there was, firstly, all of us have a choice in this world, but we also have something known as fate. So we have a fate and we have a choice. Somebody is not on mute. Okay. So what it really means is, while I have control over my life, the environment also has a role to play in making me what I am. Now that environment around me is something that sends to me, knowingly or unknowingly to me, certain triggers. And these triggers are those people, those situations, and those events which, when I interact with, I by an impulse immediately react to that trigger by a default behavior of mine. Now this default behavior of mine, if it is productive, then there is no problem. But many of these triggers bring in us certain amount of behaviors which are unproductive behaviors. And we need to be aware about where do we get into those unproductive behaviors. And with this awareness, to say that when I go to a meeting, and in the meeting, if somebody asks me a question, I get triggered to respond to him in a manner which is not professional. Obviously, there's something I need to do to change that. And that is where we realized that to be able to change that, we must understand the 3-step process of what is the trigger. Based on the trigger, what is my thought and my emotion that gets triggered inside me, which is known as the impulse. Based on that thought and that emotion that is triggered within me, what is the behavior that I demonstrate? And here we are looking at unproductive behaviors, counterproductive behaviors, behaviors which are stopping us to achieve our potential. Now, with that awareness that this is the trigger, this is the impulse, and this is the behavior, now we go to the next step to say, when this trigger happens and there's an impulse that I react with, what is the consequence of that impulse? What is it that if I continuously keep having that thought and emotion, which is a negative thought and negative emotion, for a long period in my life, what would be the natural consequence of it? How does it impact me? And how does it impact people around me? So I increase my awareness about the consequence of that impulse. And having identified that this consequence is not what I want, I then identify new ways to be able to respond in those situations. Now, the 3 ways that we identified where we could respond in any situation could be to avoid, to overcome, and what was the third? Anybody remembers?
To adjust.
And adjust. Very well said. So to avoid, to adjust, and overcome. So based on that, we were able to bring out certain new behaviors that I can demonstrate in that same trigger situation, which enables me to limit my impulse and is able for me to make a choice, a positive choice of demonstrating a behavior which is more in line to supporting me in the end product or the goal that I want to achieve. So that is what we went through. And we also realized there were encouraging triggers, there were discouraging triggers, there were productive triggers, there were unproductive triggers. So that is where we understood how we can manage environments around us, because the fact is a lot of things around us is not within our control, but what is in our control is how we react or respond to those triggers. So that's the summary of what we did in the first 2 sessions today. So just for all of you who were not here, just wanted to give you an update. Also a quick revision for people who were attending it, and we had a fantastic conversation and involvement with people.
So can I have just one question?
Please, ma'am.
Yeah, how
did
to
you-
take
did
a
you-
decision? I
What?
attended. I'm Brinda here. sir.
Okay, Abhinda, sorry.
how to take a decision, when to adjust, when to avoid. I mean, those things. How to take the decision.
Okay, so I think the best thing is firstly to identify what all choices you have. Right? So that's a very important question, because the brain can zoom out or zoom in. It can do one thing at a time. When you make choices, your brain need to be zoomed out to be able to identify whatever you can do. Okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do that. At that point in time, you're not taking a decision what I will do or will not do. So from slightly, it's known as clarity of distance, keeping that situation away from me, I identify a number of things I can do. And that's not the decision taking time, that's the choice creation time. So the first thing is to create as many choices as you can. And I would suggest create at least 10 of them. Now comes the time of making a decision. Now decision is a time where you identify that out of this 10, which are the 2 or 3 most relevant ones which are likely to give me an outcome. Now please see the choice of word that I've used. What I'm likely to get an outcome with. The interesting part about life is that unless I don't test something out in the real world, I cannot know what will succeed or will not succeed. So I choose by my experience of the likelihood of what will succeed. I get into that situation, I move into that situation knowingly, and I try out a behavior. I try out a choice, and then look for feedback as to what is coming back to me. It is by this is known as empirical creativity. What does it mean is, I go and test out something, and when I test out, I keep taking feedback, body language, what people are saying, ask a friend, hey, how did it land? So it is only by test and trial can you get to know what will work for you. Nobody in this world can tell you what will work for you and in this situation. And it is also very important for us to know that whenever we are acting on something or doing something new, you should be in the moment and mindful of what is happening around you, so you can make the necessary adjustment on spot, rather than making that thing go bad completely and then trying to recover it. Right? So that's why input on what will work or what will not work. The proof of the pudding will be only whether people will eat it or like it.
What should be the base that I have to keep for deciding about the choices, sir?
Okay, in my case, there's only 3 things that I do when I have to make a decision. 3 things, nothing else. I ask myself 3 questions. Is this immoral? Is this illegal? Will this hurt somebody? As long as anything is not immoral, illegal, or it will not hurt somebody, I'm now ready to try whatever I want to try. If these 3 things say it won't hurt, it's not illegal, immoral, or does not hurt anybody, that is the decision making point that I take. There are a lot of ways to do it. There's one fantastic way of decision making which you can read somewhere, and you can type it and Google it. It is known as the decision making matrix, or the prioritized decision making matrix. I don't have time to complete here, but fundamentally you choose some parameters against which you check whether that choice of yours meets those parameters.
I
Maybe
actually have used this for my company. Maybe I should try it out for personal. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. So my first thing is immoral, illegal, does not hurt anybody's interest. 1. And then there may be other parameters, and I have 3 choices. Immoral, no way. Illegal, no way. Hurt somebody, may hurt somebody, no way. Then I put other 3-4 parameters. But so somebody asked me, how do you get to know what is ethical and what is not ethical? I said, firstly, morality is nobody's business to tell anybody. I'm not interested in telling you what is morality, because everybody's morality is different, right? Morality is what you believe is right. And anything that you have a belief on, I have no right to tell you you're right or wrong. So morality is what that society, so what may be okay morality wise in the US may not be in India, may not be in UAE, because that is a societal diktat to say this is moral, this is immoral. But ethical, I know what is ethical. And for me, ethical is the three things that I talked about. As long as it is not these three things, for me, it is an ethical thing.
Got you,
Right?
sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A long answer to a short question, but but they're rarely very straightforward, black and white. Please remember, stop thinking of life as black and white. Try to understand the grays of life, and then you'll find the beauty of life. Okay, great. So having gone through that, now let us go to something very, very interesting and something that I've been doing for the last, again, 9 years. Working on helping people becoming transpersonal leaders. Transpersonal is beyond myself. Personal is self, trans is beyond self. And this is also known as leading beyond the ego. That means I become a leader. So we have heard about transactional leaders, leaders who work in a manner which is only focused on getting results. Transactional. I interact with you to get company's objectives. That's it. Then there's another kind of leader who are transformational leaders, who focus on organizational outcomes, but also focus on people development. So they transform people. So when I interact with them as a transformational leader, while certainly I'm focusing at the outcome of the organization, I'm also wanting to transform and empower and enable the person I am interacting with. Now, this is transpersonal leader, a person who thinks beyond his own personal self-interests and keeps the interest of all other stakeholders in mind in his interaction with the world. So we are going to talk about it, and since transpersonal leadership is something which is very high level, we are also going to talk about the journey we need to take to reach that level. If I have to reach a destination, I can't para-drop on that. I can't go on a plane and jump from the plane with a parachute. I need to go through a journey of growth to achieve that. So that is what we are going to talk about in this workshop. This is coming out of our association with Leadership Global. Leadership Global is a UK-based organization which has a global footprint and which has been working on evidence-based research focused on emotional intelligence and ethical intelligence for the last 20 years. John Knight is the MD and chairman of this, and I've been fortunate to work with him and learn from him over the last 9 to 10 years. And the first time I met him, I couldn't fathom how a person who was so enriched in knowledge could be so humble at the same time. So there's a lot of things that I've learned from him, and I'll be sharing that content with you. So these are published thought leaders. Leading Beyond the Ego is the book. And again, I would earnestly request you to buy this book for your library, to read through it, because this gives you the entire journey of how do we become a transpersonal leader. And I'll be covering part of that journey in this 1.5 hours. So Leading Beyond the Ego. Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing him or herself. That is what Leo Tolstoy said, and this is also, I think, the Vice Chancellor has mentioned about this, right? And Mahatma Gandhi also used to say this: be the change you want to see. So as a leader, the first responsibility that we have, if we really want to be a true leader, is to work on improving ourselves. It is only when people around us see us working on improving ourselves in spite of our seniority, in spite of our experience, in spite of being a great leader, but still striving to get even better, we trigger in them an inspiration to become better themselves. So the true way of making or inspiring people to change is not only telling them what to do, but actually walking the talk so that they have a role model. And we talked about it also in the disc to say the most important, one of the ways by which our personality develops is by seeing our role models. So here we need to be the role models to people around us, because the easiest way to learn is to role model what you see. So with that context in mind, let us see the sequence of this presentation. So first we'll talk about what is transpersonal leadership. The journey that we need to take to become a transpersonal leader. The first step in the journey, we call it the intermediate journey on how do we become a robust, emotionally aware leader. And the last step is the advanced journey. How do we become a radical and an ethical, authentic leader? So as you can see, both of them are real, REAL. So the first journey is robust, emotional, aware leader, which is the first journey. And then it's the radical, ethical, authentic leader, which is your second or advanced journey. Now what it really means is that in our journey to becoming a better leader, we first need to work on our emotional intelligence. That is the intermediate journey. Having become emotionally intelligent, we need to then work on ethical intelligence. And that is where, when we walk into this journey and grow into the journey, we start becoming a transpersonal leader. So we'll go through all these 4 elements in this workshop. So what is a transpersonal leader? A transpersonal leader operates beyond their ego, continuing their personal development and learning. So they are forever learning. They are forever seeking to get better. They are always not looking for self-actualization, but self-transcending themselves. Now it also means that they are radical. Radical means they can come out with innovative solutions. The problem with innovation or being radical is that you have a huge risk of failure. But because these leaders are looking to make an impact on the larger good of the humankind, of the human beings, they are ready to take risk and try out new things which have never been tried before. That is where radical comes in. So while they are radical, they are also ethical. They ensure that whatever they do is neither immoral, neither unethical, or neither is it hurting anybody, hurting any stakeholder. And they are authentic, meaning what they are inside is what they portray outside. Authenticity is what? Whatever I am, I express it openly. I am what I am. Now there's a problem. There's a big risk in being authentic. If, let's say, internally I'm not a good human being and I follow authenticity, that means whatever I'm inside, I will demonstrate outside without showing anything. I'm transparent to the world. But if what is inside me is negative and I become transparent to the world, what will the world see? They will see a negative leader. So before you really become authentic, you need to clean up yourself inside, right? So that when you come out and become authentic and transparent, people are able to see somebody that they can inspired with and who can be a role model. So while they are radical, ethical, authentic, they are also emotionally intelligent and caring. They care about people. They care about the impact of their decisions on people and how it will impact others, not only themselves. Also, these leaders create performance enhancing culture within organizations. What is performance enhancing culture? A culture which is continuously trying to get better and better and better. A lot of people say, Pawan, I do workshops to get people to achieve high performance culture. Now, in my view, there's nothing known as a high performance culture because there is no one benchmark to say, if I reach here, I'm high performance. After that high performance, there needs to be another improvement. So what are we trying to do is, irrespective of where we are as a culture within the organization, we are forever trying to improve it. And that is why we say performance enhancing culture. Also, whenever we take a decision, and that brings me to that Brinda's point, which suddenly I've got an aha moment to say, oh my God, I forgot to tell her that. We need to ask ourselves that whether we are taking a decision and what decision we are taking, is it going to lead to a sustainable organization? Is it going to lead to a sustainable company? Is it going to help us achieve a sustainable planet? So sustainability is the benchmark of a good decision. If you take a decision, let's say I take a decision today not to continuously exercise. And I ask myself this fundamental question, is this the right decision? Then I say to myself, if I continuously work on this decision of mine, what would be the natural consequence of this decision on me and people around me 10 years from now? And the moment I get an answer that in the long run, it is going to impact me and the organization and people around me negatively. Short term, it can be of advantage, right? The case of Volkswagen. Volkswagen is the #1 Indian worldwide car company in the world, #1. And what did they do? They decided to tinker with their pollution measurement systems, so that the pollution of the car was shown as less while it was polluting more. Why were they doing it? Because they were looking for short-term gains of profitability, of continuing to be #1. Now, when they got caught, it impacted the sustainability of the organization to remain #1. So that's another way by which you can find out whether the decision that you take, is it sustainable in the long run? So this is what a transpersonal leader is. Whatever decision he takes, he doesn't only think about the short-term gains, but he looks at the long-term gains of the decision that he's taking. And in the long term, it should positively impact all stakeholders, all relevant stakeholders. Any questions anybody has on transpersonal leader? Because this is a difficult concept to understand. Any question? Clear? Okay. If this is clear, let's move forward. Now, to become a transpersonal leader, we need to work on 3 intelligences. The first is rational intelligence. What is rational intelligence? IQ. What is IQ? Using my IQ, because IQ is genetic, using my IQ to pick up functional skills, technical skills, becoming an expert in my area of expertise and understanding businesses well. So rational intelligence is business skills. Rational intelligence is taking management courses. Rational intelligence is having academic certifications. Rational intelligence is being functionally good in the job that I do. Rational intelligence is also, if I am in the technical field, understanding technology well. After having done that, that is not the end. That is just the start. The next step is emotional intelligence. So rational intelligence improves my personal capability, my individual capability to impact an organization and my job. But as I go higher, I need to involve and get larger number of people collaborating towards the larger aim of the organization goal or the team goal. And that is where emotional intelligence comes in. Emotional intelligence is required for people skills. How do we interact with people? How do we influence people? How do we manage conflicts? So we'll talk about 19 competencies. There are total of 19 competencies in emotional intelligence. Most of us believe emotional intelligence is only 2 competencies: understanding your emotion and being able to control it. Far from truth. These are just 2 of the 19 competencies that we have. But then these are all people skills. Having got emotional intelligence, then we need to go to spiritual intelligence. So this journey of rational intelligence, which we assume people have achieved before they jump into this book, Leading Beyond the Ego. So we assume people have achieved the rational intelligence level. We then take them in the first journey of being emotional intelligent leaders, and then ethical intelligence, raising their SQ, spiritual quotient. So that is the 3 intelligence that we need to tap into. And that is why you will now understand what I said. It is a journey. It's not an easy journey. And never ever can any man claim to have achieved it to perfection in his lifetime. So we are going to talk about it. When you are able to be rational and emotional intelligence, you are able to create performance enhancing culture within an organization. When you put in spiritual intelligence also, then you are able to be caring and sustainable. And when you start working at the sustainability or the ethics part of it, you need to use rational intelligence because that's ethical, and also spiritual intelligence part of it. And when you are able to do all of that, that red circle there is the one where you're creating performance enhancing culture, which is both ethical, caring, and sustainable. So that's the connection between these. Can you brief your spirituality? We'll come to that. We'll come to that. I normally, and that is why in the book we never talk about spirituality. We talk about ethics, ethical leadership, and ethical intelligence and emotional intelligence, because spirituality is something which people see as connected to religions. And here we are not talking about religions, we are talking about ethics, doing the right thing in the right manner for the right purpose. And we'll come to that. Okay, so we are finished with what is transpersonal leadership. Now we are going to go to our journey. What is the journey we need to take? Now this is the pathway we need to take. We all start with rational, ego-based as usual leaders. In the beginning, we have to use our prefrontal cortex, our rational brain, logic. We need to know mathematics. We need to know our subject. All that is rational. Ego-based. What is ego-based? Trying to achieve things, trying to get promotions or getting promotions, trying to get the good things in life, making money, making a house. And all these things are normal and natural for people to have. Right? So initially we are rational. We want to become good in our work. We also are ego-based, which is nothing wrong about it, because till you don't get these basic elements of your ego satisfied, you can't go beyond. As usual means everybody goes through this phase. So don't feel bad about it if today you are working for only financial outcomes. There's nothing wrong about it, because you may be in the stage of life where that could be a requirement. Having done that, then we go from there to robust, emotionally aware leaders, where you start thinking about people. And from there, then you go to a radical, ethical, authentic leader, where you start not only thinking about your immediate people and the people around you, but you start thinking of the larger good, the common good, the bigger good, the higher good. So that is where your journey starts. You launch, you go to the intermediate, and you go to the advanced. Now let's start off with the intermediate journey. The intermediate journey has got 7 steps. The first step is understanding what leadership is in the context of 21st century. See, in the context of 21st century, we are going through one crisis after another. What happens during a crisis? Our emotions get negatively impacted. We get into stress. We get burdened, overburdened. We get overworked. So our emotions are not able to see the slides. Are you in the spotlight mode, or are you in some other mode?
Spotlight mode, sir.
You are in the spotlight mode. Even then, you can't see it.
I can see, but I cannot read the contents.
Okay, I've done it purposely so that you can't read. No, I'm joking.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. Yeah.
Then it's okay.
Can you now see it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So for a while you can't see me, and thank God for that. Okay, so these are the steps that we go. Understand leadership. What is leadership in the 21st century? Why is it that emotional intelligence has suddenly become more important? It is because of the stresses that we are living in. It is because of the fast changes that we are made to do because of the environment changing. So every time the environment changes, and we as human beings need to change faster and faster, we need to be emotionally intelligent. And here that we get to know that emotional intelligence is a very major part of a leader. From there, then we move on to say that how can we increase our self-awareness? So here we do a little self-assessment about ourselves, and we identify specifically which areas of emotional intelligence do we need to get better at. Having done that, then we learn how to become aware of our emotions and how to manage our emotions. To actually see an entire workshop on that, the link that Nikhit is going to send you about these workshops, in that YouTube channel, you will see a workshop of mine on emotional intelligence. And in that, I've covered almost an hour and a half on how can you recognize your emotions and how can you control your emotions. So that's the next step. A leader should be able to manage his emotions, especially during difficult times, and behave in a manner that enables people to build up trust on the leader. Now, having done that, then we identify 6 different emotional intelligence leadership styles, and we'll talk about it today. So there are 6 EI leadership styles. Each style is relevant in certain situations. So each one of them, none of them is bad or good. Each one is relevant in certain situations. So we'll talk about that. And then how do leaders interact with people within their organization through a coaching conversation methodology and build up a performance enhancing culture within the organization. So please remember, the connect between a leader and an employee, and how do you make that employee behave in a manner, because what are you trying to create? You want to create a performance enhancing culture. So what is a culture? Culture is the behavior that is expected and appreciated and demonstrated by employees of an organization. So we want an employees of an organization to behave in a certain way. And when they behave in a certain way, we also appreciate that. And when we appreciate that, others see that appreciation and they also then get driven to follow the same behavior. So that is where having coaching conversations with people enable us to influence them in a manner that they start behaving in a manner which is relevant to the performance enhancing culture of the organization. So we do that. After that, we also talk about what is a contract, and this is known as a psychological contract. It's not a written contract. What is a psychological contract that there is between a follower and a leader? So the psychological contract starts with the leader first, saying that I will demonstrate or I will behave in a manner that will build your trust on me. That is a psychological contract. And the follower is then saying, if I trust you and I see the behavior and I see the congruence of what you say and what you do, I will also start behaving in the same manner as you are behaving. So this is a psychological contract. So there are 10 points in this contract which says how can we psychologically inspire people to follow me as a leader. And the 7th step is doing a 360-degree assessment where we ask 12 to 18 people inputs on which behaviors do they see in me from an emotional intelligence point of view, and which areas do you want me to get better at. So after the 7th, then these leaders start building on the key strength and then start developing new behaviors that their employees are telling them that this is a behavior I want to see in you. So this is the journey that we go through when we go from being a rational, ego-based, as usual leader to moving to becoming a robust, emotionally aware leader. Now this book, again, I'm just showing this book to you so that you can just write the book down. Leading Beyond the Ego, How to Become a Transpersonal Leader by John Knight, Daniel Grant, and Greg Young. They all three are from Leadership Global. This book gives you practical methodology. So it's not an academic book. It's a practical book. And this practical book gives us the journey of what we want to achieve or what do we need to do to move into this journey to become a transpersonal leader. So far, we have learned what is transpersonal leadership. Secondly, we have learned how and what journey do we need to take to move from becoming a transpersonal leader. And now we'll go to how do we become a robust, emotionally aware leader. Now, this is the intermediate journey that I talked about. If you see these 5 or 5 photographs, right, images, what comes in your mind? What do you think this journey would look like? Anybody? What comes in your mind? How do you connect all these 4 or 5 photographs, images?
Aligning towards values and personal growth.
Right? Where do you see values?
No, see, there are like culture, code, ethics, those words and all are there.
Okay.
Value is there in the fourth picture too.
Yes, yes. Absolutely.
Ideology, those words, all these words, integrity, all these words somewhere relate to values.
Yeah.
And again, I did see words like goals,
Right.
and help, focus. Those things are words of personal growth
Right.
and people.
Great. So personal growth and people growth, both you are talking about both of them, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
Maintain performance through good relationship, managing good relationship, and communicating with others in a friendly manner.
Great, great. So this is beautifully said. Again, very well. There's a performance there. To achieve performance, you need to communicate with people. And as you communicate with people and tell them what is required of them, they start behaving in a particular manner, which creates a culture. And for us to be able to do that, we need to have different leadership styles. And also we need to have self-development, individual personal growth. First, moving to leadership styles, moving to conversations, moving to culture, moving to performance. So great. So you got it right. So let's go through it. So one sad news that I'd like to give you is that when we are born, we are as good as the primitive man. So the brain hasn't really developed much. The primitive man's brain and the human being's brain today as we are born, from the fundamental point of its structure, of what it does, hasn't changed much. What it really means to us is that all of us are born with something known as an emotional brain, and we are born wired in a manner that we are always looking and looking for danger, even when danger is not there. Somebody's got his mic on and there's a lot of noise there. Please switch off. It's hurting my ear, please. Yeah, thank you so much. Right? So what it really means is all of us are pre-wired to first look for danger, to first think negatively, to first see the downside of things, to first see the negative in people. Right? Because that was what was required in the Stone Age. Because in the Stone Age, we needed to, I mentioned this earlier in one of my workshops when I said that in the Stone Age, how did the human being survive? He was neither the fastest to run. He didn't have had developed his brain too much. His IQ was also not much. He did not have claws. He did not have teeth. He had nothing to save himself. So how did he save himself? The reason why the Stone Age man was able to save himself was because God gave human beings one thing which he gave nobody. And that is that the human being, when he was walking through the forest and he heard a rustle in the bush, the first thing he imagined was danger. And he ran without thinking and got up to the nearest tree and looked back after that to see whether that was a mouse or a saber-toothed tiger. So meaning that even today, a mail that comes to us which has got a tone slightly which is annoying makes us imagine the worst. Somebody talks to us in a voice which is or uses some words which we did not expect. The first thing that we start thinking is negative. Your child has gone to school, hasn't come back. The first thing that comes to my mind is negative. So we are rewired to think negatively. So while we are not living in a world that is as dangerous as the Stone Age man walking through the jungle, we still are born primitively. And that is why we need to work on building our emotional intelligence during our lifetime. Now, what happens to leaders? This is very, very important slide. And this says that as we move from being an individual contributor to a line manager, to a manager of managers, to a senior executive, the level of importance of functional and technical skills reduces. And the level of importance of people skills and social awareness and social skills increases. The time that a senior executive spends on technical, academic, functional skills is lesser than somebody who is in the front end. Not able to see my slide? I don't think that could be. Can anybody see my slide or you can't see the slide? Can you see my slide?
Yes, Professor, we can see.
Yes, sir.
No issues.
We
I
can
don't
see.
know. So please put me on spotlight mode. Who can't see? Though let me also try to put this more closer, right? Okay. So this is the gap we need to fill up. We need to build our self and social awareness skills or people skills the higher we go. So why do you think the higher you go, the more time you need to spend on people skills? Why do you think so? Anybody? Why do you think that is so? And is it right or you don't agree with it?
Yeah, I agree with you, sir, because as you grow in the corporate career, you want to meet many people, many projects. So obviously, you need more exposure to the world, some social skills, people skills,
Absolutely.
than the technical stuff. Yes.
So very well said, very well said. Higher you go, you are responsible for a larger number of people, right? And you have to get these people to do the work to achieve the organizational goals, and that is why people skills becomes important. Hence, it also gives us one more input that as we go higher, we need to keep improving our people skills. And these people skills that I'm talking about are skills which are known as emotional intelligence skills. So today, good leadership is about people. It is about it's about behavioral skills or people skills. It's about personal development of you and them, empowering them, delegating and supporting them. It's about skillfully using your emotions and getting others to use them. We call this emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence, the good news is that while IQ cannot be changed beyond a certain point because IQ is genetically given to us, emotional intelligence is something that can be rewired throughout our lives. We can continuously evolve and get better. Another name that I use for emotional intelligence and which all of you will connect to is known as maturity. Right? All of us can become more and more matured, read emotional intelligence, even when you have white hair like mine. Right? So we have an ability to continuously improve ourselves on emotional intelligence skills, and that is why we need to work on it in a systematic manner, specifically as we start going to higher levels of leadership. It is not given that it will automatically come to us. Some of it may come automatically by experience, but a lot of it has to be done intentionally. Now, the top leaders across the world are good at three things. The first is they know how they feel, and they know how to manage their feeling. The second, when they interact with people, they are aware of what others are feeling. And based on understanding what others are feeling, they can then now relate to people and act in a manner that can support the improvement of performance of those people and themselves. So knowing your emotions, knowing others' emotions, and then interacting with them in a manner which puts them in a positive frame of mind is the core purpose of any leader. The core purpose of any leader is to be able to keep people in the highest state of positivity towards achievement of organizational goals. That is all. Right? So that is what top leaders are. Now, these are the 4 competencies of emotional intelligence. Can I have somebody explaining each one of them to me? I'm sure you know it already. What does each one of them, when we start with self-awareness, when we go to self-management, then we'll go to social awareness, then relationship management. Anybody can explain this diagram, please.
Shall I go?
Yes, please, ma'am.
Okay. So self-awareness is knowing about oneself, my emotions, what triggers me, what makes me happy, and for what I get motivated, for what I get demotivated, those things, and what would be my passion. Knowing about what are my strengths, weakness, and my motivation factors. Self-management is when I get distressed emotions or when I get happy emotions, how am I going to handle those things? Like how you said the 24 hours rule.
Yes.
Like knowing that thing and okay, fine, this is distressful emotion. Let me have it for 24 hours and then the time is over. Let me go ahead for a job. And relationship management is knowing my emotions and knowing others' emotions and not letting my emotions bothering others and again not letting others' emotions bothering me.
Very well. Very
So
well.
social awareness is and relationship management is again how you talk, how I can improve others' performance knowing their emotions. Like we can always manipulate knowing someone's emotions, but then choosing not to, but then empowering them. Knowing someone.
So you, instead of manipulation, which seems a very negative word,
Yeah, might be, but then
influence, how we can
you
influence people.
you
Right?
can also manipulate, but then you choose not to manipulate, but then
Yeah.
you rather choose that same knowledge
Influence.
to empower them,
Right.
empower or influence them in a right way.
So what's the difference between manipulation and influence? Manipulation is for my
Manipulation,
personal good,
yeah, for my personal good.
and influence is for our common purpose,
Exactly.
good for both of us.
For
Right?
both of us, and empowering us for their own goodness.
Very, very good.
And social awareness is how I behave in a society, in a culture, and though I may be someone who might not belong to the same belief system, but still how I really accept it and let people have their own life and
Wonderful.
accept things as it is. That's
Fantastic.
for my knowledge right now.
Who's that? Who was that? Well, I can't
Binda,
see.
sir.
Binda, thank you so much, Binda. Fantastic. So
Thank
I
you,
think
sir.
very well said. Anybody else would like to add on?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please, ma'am.
Um, Actually, when we have self-awareness, that is, I'm aware of my own feelings and everything. I'm totally aware of myself. Then it's very easy for me to manage myself at different situations. So self-awareness will always lead to good self-management.
Right.
Once I can manage myself, it's very easy for me to understand others. That is my social awareness. So I can understand the people around me and their feelings. And once I am aware of the society, then it's very easy for me to maintain the relationship with others.
Beautiful. Very
So
well said. Very well. I think big round of applause to both of you. And I really love the fact that you have been able to explain this entire diagram very well. And there are only, you know, 1, 2, 3, 8 words here, but you have been able to put so many other words which are so relevant to it. I also love the fact how you were able to connect it. And that was beautiful, right? Self-awareness. If I'm self-aware, only then I can manage myself. If I'm not aware, I'm angry. Can I manage that? I can't, right? And if I'm able to manage myself and be aware about myself, only then I can really understand people, right? And only when I can really understand what's happening within people, can I then take actions to be able to be demonstrating behaviors which can work for the common good of both of us. So self-awareness, self-management, moving to social awareness and relationship management, this is exactly the sequence in which we grow. All of you put your hands like this as if you are holding a small ball. Just put your hands like this as if you're holding a small ball. Now, if this ball was to grow bigger, how would your hand move? Right? So what does this mean? Any growth is inside out. First inside, then outside. Right? So we need to work. We want to change the world, but who's thinking about changing oneself? If we want to change the world, we have to first change ourselves inside. As we grow from inside, as we become self-aware and self-management, then we can start becoming socially aware and relationship management will improve. So any change happens inside out first. So with that context that we have, let's go down to the 19 competencies, and I will just zoom this slightly for us to see. Yes, maybe zoom out a bit. So these are the 19 competencies that they are. First, under self-awareness, there are 3 competencies. Emotional self-awareness. Being aware about the emotion that I'm feeling now. How do you get to know what emotion you are feeling? Through sensations in my body. Every emotion, negative or positive, at an extreme level, gives certain sensations in our body which tell us that we are feeling an emotion. The more we are aware of our body and the sensations in our body, the more early we can identify to say, anger rising, jealousy, right? So being aware about the body, being connected to it, being able to see that there is suddenly a tightening of my stomach and there seems to be a lump on my chest, gives me an early indicator that I'm about to get angry. And it will be different for different people. And that is why meditation or mindfulness, and we talked about it yesterday also, are some ways by which you can become more aware about your body and the sensations of your body and connect that with emotions. So the first thing is emotional self-awareness. The second is accurate self-assessment. See, all of us are human beings, and because we are human beings, we have certain strengths and we have certain areas of development. Or let's be open and transparent, some weaknesses. I should be aware of what my strengths are. I should also be aware of what are not my strengths. And I should have the courage to ask for help without feeling afraid, without feeling what will people think about me, so that you can ask for help when you need help to get the outcome that you want. So understanding yourself, your strengths and your weaknesses, what is accurate self-assessment. Also under self-awareness comes self-confidence. So we must have the appropriate level of self-confidence. Too much of self-confidence leads to arrogance. Too little of self-confidence leads to not taking any step outside my comfort zone. So these three elements come under self-awareness. From there, we then go to self-management. Self-management is about emotional self-control. Like very well said before, if I am emotionally self-aware, I can then use strategies to control myself. It is about transparency. Telling people, not hiding facts from people. Being transparent and open in conversing with people. That comes under self-management. Adaptability, changing as the need desires. Achievement orientation, be result focused. Initiative, be proactive in taking the steps that I need to take. And a very important facet that is known as optimism. Always seeing the upside of things rather than seeing the downside of things. Seeing the situation always as half glass full than half glass empty. So this comes under self-awareness and self-management. Now under social awareness, we have empathy. Empathy is understanding what people are feeling and why they are feeling. Not only what they are feeling, why they are feeling so. What is the perspective through which they are seeing the situation. Service orientation is to be seeing yourself as a servant leader. To understand that the basic aim of everybody's life in this earth is only one, is to support each other in a manner that it makes your life simpler and my life simpler too. So that is service orientation, seeing yourself in the service of others. Then organization awareness is something which is difficult to understand. But let me explain it. This is understanding the political environment of your organization. This is also to understand who are the people in my organization who have greater influence. It is also being able to network with the right people. It is also to be able to use the people with influence to get your work done. But not for your personal benefit, but for the organizational benefit. So when I took this LIPA, the leadership assessment tool myself, they asked me this question. They asked me, are you aware about the political groups in your organization? I said, see, trick question. They're trying to catch me. I said, no. Then they asked me the next question. Do you use your influence with others to get the work done which will benefit your organization and your team? I said, use? Trick question. I said, no. I got 0 in organizational awareness. Please remember, in the real world, you will need to learn how to play the real world game. You will need to build relationships which support your growth. You will need to know and network and build relationships with people with higher influence, so that you can use that influence integrally, with integrity, to get the resources your teams require to give an outcome that will benefit the organization. So this comes under social awareness. Then under relationship management, it is inspirational leadership. How do I inspire people? How do I influence others and not manipulate them? How do I spend time in developing others and grow and empower them? How do I not only make a change happen, but identify where does a change requires to be taking place and catalyze that change proactively. See, there's a difference between change management and change catalyst. Change management is managing a change, so it is passive. Change catalyst is initiating a change, so it is active and proactive. Also what comes under it is conflict management. We all know this. See, The moment there is an organization, the moment there is a team, the moment there are people, conflicts are bound to happen. And conflicts are good for the organization. Why? Because they allow different perspectives to be brought out in the open. So it is not about conflict removal. It is about managing conflicts in a manner that they provide a positive input for the growth of team members and the organization. It is about building bonds, and it is about teamwork and collaboration. Anybody can tell me the difference between building bonds and teamwork and collaboration? What could be the difference between these two? Difference between building bonds and teamwork and collaboration. Take a bet.
Team is, for example, if I'm working in a department, I'm working with the same goal for some particular focused work,
Right.
where we are working as a team. For example, we are organizing a conference or something like that. And collaborative research is something which is interdepartmental or inter-college, inter-university. I'm collaborating with somebody outside my department.
So
or
teamwork, yeah. So I said difference between teamwork and collaboration, which is one, and building bonds. Building bonds and teamwork and collaboration.
Building bonds is make a little more intimate, little more closer
Okay.
than the other things.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Absolutely. So teamwork and collaboration is basically with the people that you work. Building bonds is going beyond that. It could be with your clients. It could be with your suppliers. Right? Teamwork and collaboration, as rightly brought out earlier, was whenever there's a common goal between a team, could be intra-team or inter-team, and you need to have teamwork and collaboration to achieve a common goal, then that is teamwork and collaboration. When you go beyond that, networking, building bonds with people beyond where you need a common goal, but you still need to build relationship with them, clients, your suppliers, your dealers, right? So that is where you start building bonds. It is also senior people. You build bonds with seniors also. You don't do teamwork and collaboration with seniors. So that's the difference. Great. So 19 competencies are what there is in emotional intelligence. Most of us always connected emotional intelligence to only one or two of them. You can see everything that is required in a behavioral skill and leadership skills. Is there any leadership skill left? No. From a people skills point of view, there is no leadership skills left here. So it covers all these 19 competencies. Okay. So what have we understood? Emotional intelligence, the four competencies, and these are capabilities. So these are 4 competencies and 19 capabilities. From there we say, okay, let us understand what are the 6 leadership styles. The most successful leaders learn to behave differently at different times, in different companies and in different parts of the world. So the leader of today has to be a chameleon. He needs to keep changing his colors based on the situation, based on the people he is interacting with, based on what he wants as an outcome. So there are total of 6 leadership styles. On the right, another leadership style, I have given the leadership styles. On the right, I have given the situation. They are not aligned. So I have not put the right one in front of each one of them. So just think for around 5 minutes. I'll take a 5-minute break. And in the meantime, you will tell me visionary style connects with which situation on the right hand side. So it is not during crisis, it is something else. So just take some time. I will, in the meantime, take a 5-minute break. As per my watch, it is 3:20. 3:25 will be back, right? 3:21 by the watch here that I can see. So 3:26 will be back. In the meantime, you identify which style connects with which situation. Is that okay?
Yes, sir, you can take break. I think you need a break, sir.
Yeah, in the meantime, you can do that.
Sure,
Yes.
sir.
It's so tough after lunch. Before lunch,
Yeah.
life is okay. You can't do it. Last time Belinda told me this also. She said, "Come on, take a break. We are finishing that time." Okay.
नहीं सर, आप ले लीजिए, आपको जरूरत भी है, काफी सुबह से बोल रहे हैं आपसे.
And in the meantime, you can just check this out, huh? And
Sure,
I'll come
sir,
back
sure.
to you.
Brinda ma'am, enjoying the sessions? मैम भी ब्रेक पे चले.
Okay, who can help us out? And whoever will come up now will only talk, will only take the first three, only the first three.
Commanding us to crisis.
No, we start from the first number, one.
Visionary style, growth phase of organization. sir.
One second. Visionary style,
Growth
growth
phase of
phase.
organization.
Okay. So no, next person. No, not right. Next person.
The teaching learning should be changed, sir, now.
What should happen? What should change?
Coaching style you have told, no, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, learning style should be changed, sir. Learning style and coaching style, teaching style.
No, coaching is not teaching. Coaching is making the person come out with his own ideas without you helping him or her.
Grow people and organization at the same time. That is coaching.
So,
Absolutely. So that's right. Perfect. So coaching style we are done with. Grow people and organization at the same time. Perfect. Somebody was talking. Somebody got.
In direction required, sir.
One second. Somebody was saying commanding. Who was saying commanding first?
Brinda.
Yeah, Brinda, tell me commanding. What was it?
Commanding during crisis.
Okay, done. So 2 done. Third.
Visionary, is it change in direction is required?
Absolutely.
Right.
Change in direction. Absolutely. Great. You have to show vision. This is where we have to go now. This is what we want to achieve, right? So we are going somewhere, or visionary can also happen in a startup. There's no change in direction, but you are giving them a direction. In big organization, change in direction. In an entrepreneurship, it is startup, right? That also can happen. Great. So visionary done, coaching done, commanding done.
Pace setting is growth phase of organization.
Absolutely. Pace setting is growth phase. You want to grow pace, target pe target pe target pe target. I call it QT. Quarter se quarter tak. Every quarter give a target and tell people to achieve it, right? Growth phase, everything has to be there. Just get your targets going. Great. What's the next? Democratic.
When there are specialists in your team who have more experience and knowledge.
Very simple. Democratic is there. Left with affiliative.
What does affiliative mean, sir?
Affiliative means making people get along with each other.
Okay, all team members are superstars.
Superstars. Chak De mein what did Shah Rukh Khan do? All these superstars have their own ego, if you remember that movie. Right? So what he had to do was, he had to make them, so he was using commanding style in the initial stages. But when these girls were having that last dinner in the dhaba, and they bashed up these boys, that is a time that they became a team. Otherwise, normally what happens, if your team has got all superstars, you as a leader has only one job to do. Keep looking for conflicts where they are arising and going and making them get together. Oh, come on, yeah, you both. So you are only trying to manage conflict and looking for conflict. So these are the 6 styles that you have. All the styles are used at certain phases of a situation. So as I said, nothing is good or nothing is bad. Now, each of these styles has got certain emotional intelligence capabilities connected with it. Like visionary, you need to be having self-confidence. You have to get up and be able to speak to people. You need to be, make them feel good about themselves. If I don't feel good about myself, if I don't have confidence, I cannot be a visionary. Then you have to have transparency. You have to tell people what is in your heart. You can't keep it in your heart. You have to be a change catalyst, and you have to be inspirational. So you see, each of the leadership styles necessitates 3 to 4 relevant capabilities of emotional intelligence, and based on what you need to do. So for senior leadership, what do you think are the most important ones? Senior most leadership, visionary and coaching, right? So these are the competencies that you need. You need emotional self-awareness. In coaching, I can't get angry. I can't tell you what to do because I have to make you come out with your own answers. I have to understand you and your perspective. That is empathy. And when I'm coaching you, I'm also developing you. So as you can see, every leadership style is connected directly with some emotional intelligence capability. Right? So that's the connection between emotional intelligence, capability, and leadership styles. Now, which do you do most of and which do you need to do more? This is your personal checklist. Which one do you demonstrate more? And which are the ones that you want to demonstrate more? So just take your choice. What is the one that you want to do more of and what is the one you are doing as of now? For everybody who's working with other people, you have to choose the ones that you need to do for yourself. So anybody just share, which do you do most and which do you need to do more? In your work. Just share anything that you feel. Some of you have got teams, no? You have team members under you? Yeah, Anuradha.
Hello, sir. Yeah. I have got 2 members reporting to me. Actually.
Okay.
With one member, I have to be affiliative. That is, I have to set, I have to fix targets each and every time and keep reminding about the target date and achievements, everything.
So
but
that's more, but this is more of pace setting.
Pace setting. Okay. Yeah, pace setting. Correct.
Pace setting. Yeah,
pace setting. Yeah. And with the another person, I just have to give the broader perspective about what is that the particular person has to do and finish and all those things, and then I can leave it with them, and I can very calmly sit and wait for that particular person to finish everything and report it back to me.
Right. So it is something between democratic and affiliative, right?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Fantastic. And is there anything that you like to learn more of? Any other mode style that you need to learn more of for the future?
Yeah, I would like to be coming under visionary mode naturally, because I want to go up in my things.
Right.
So,
perfect. Very good.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Anybody else? So what Anuradha just said is so relevant. You could use different styles with different people based on how good or how mature they are. Okay, so with that, we have also found that a style which is least represented or demonstrated by leaders in organizations is the coaching style, and it is also the most relevant style that most leaders need to be using. There was a research done by the Google, and they came up with 8 habits that an effective Google manager must have. And if you see that the first one is be a good coach. In fact, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th even, all these 7 are areas of coaching itself. Right? So that we have found, coaching style of leadership is one of the styles that most leaders need to develop and demonstrate on a regular basis within their organization if they want to grow themselves and grow their teams. Now, also based on the style that you represent, you create an environment around you. So if you are visionary and coaching, you create a positive climate around you. Climate is what? Environment. If I show you a vision of a beautiful future, you will feel good about it. You will feel positive. If I coach you and help you get better, again, you will feel positive. If you are affiliative and democratic, even that is positive. Pace setting, if done poorly, pace setting, whenever you do pace setting, also allow the person to have their say. Don't always be the person telling them what to do and how to do it. So in pace setting, you have to tell them what they have to achieve. But you have to also start listening to them. Because if it's a one-way conversation, this is what you have to do, this is how you have to do, today and before also, any time, Nobody likes being told what to do. Nobody. And that is why if you're only doing pace setting and commanding, the culture in the climate in the organization becomes negative. And people take lesser and lesser responsibility, and the leader finds themselves more and more burdened. So based on this, if you have to do pace setting, it has to be connected with coaching style of leadership. If you have to do commanding, it has to be connected with visionary style of leadership. Now, where do you do commanding the most? Indian Army, you do the commanding, right? Services, you do commanding. But if I'm doing commanding in war, and I command people to go up the hill to die, do you think they will go? They will take the weapon and shoot me first. So what I have to do, I have to be a visionary. I have to show them this is for the motherland. And I'm going to be also the first person in front of you. So you have to combine visionary with commanding. And people have to see that what they are being told to do is for something which is so big that they don't mind doing being told what to do. So that's how you have to combine this to reduce the negativity of pace setting and commanding. Okay, so we have understood what is a transpersonal leader. We understand the journey of transpersonal leader. We understand what are the steps that we need to follow in a robust, emotionally aware leaders. Now let us become ethical leaders. So what drives you? This is a question I'm asking you. What drives you? The ego. That part of a self that is based on a self-image, that I am who I am, and is only interested in one's own personal benefit. It's not persona, it's personal benefit. So what is the main driver of your ego? It can be power. I want control. I want position. I want to be in charge. Second is prestige. I want that. I want to grow so that people look up me and respect me. It could be recognition. I want to be talked good of. And it could be reward, that is financial or material reward. So if you are only driven by these four factors, then you cannot be an ethical leader. Also, what we said right in the beginning, in the initial stages of our journey, all these four elements being our drivers is normal and okay. In the initial stages, I want power, I want position, I want to grow up, I want to get recognition, I want money. Because if I don't have that in the initial stages, that drivers, then I will never put in the hard work. And if I don't put in the hard work, I will never even reach a stage where I now need to change my drivers. But after a certain time, when you have reached a certain position, you have got sufficient money now, and after that it's only greed. At that point in time, these drivers should not be the ones that should drive you out. But what have we seen? Even people who are very rich, I'm amazed to find, I know people who at some point in time were 10,000 crores worth of money they had. But what was still driving them was these four things. And because these are the four things that were driving them, that brought their end also. Right? So after a certain stage, these should not be the drivers of what one wants to achieve. So let us see what your drivers are. So you have to move from personal ego-based leadership drivers to transpersonal leadership-based drivers, which is we should then at a higher level start thinking about interest of all stakeholders, interest of our team members, interest of the organization, interest of our clients, interest of our vendors, interest of our fourth-class employees. So we must ensure that all stakeholders, we are looking at them, because any stakeholder we don't look at or we do not provide them support, in the long run, the sustainability of the organization will go away. So we need to move from personal ego-based leadership to transpersonal leadership, where we start thinking of stakeholders or interest of all stakeholders. So let us see what your purpose is, because very few leaders give any thought to their purpose, often just attracted to power, prestige, and other financial rewards. Without purpose, leaders are at the mercy of their egos. You need your own purpose. You must understand your passion and your motivation and an environment that offers a fit. So this is a question now I'm asking you to take this little assessment for yourself. And I'm moving this closer. On each one of these questions, you have to write 1 to 5. I have a broad reason for my actions. I can't see this, 1 second. Yeah. I have a broader reason for my actions than the actions themselves. So do you strongly agree? Do you strongly disagree? Whatever you do, just write a 1, 2, 3 or whatever you want to write there. The direction I take is consistent with my values. I think strategically about my life and what is to be achieved for the greater good. I understand my goals in life and the purpose it represents. So you will find anywhere that you are giving yourself 3, 4 or 5 are areas which you need to work on. If you do not think of the broader outcome of the actions that you do and just act for the sake of short-term goals, short-term gratification, then your purpose of life is not there. If your direction, if the decisions that you take are not connected with your values and you don't know what your values are, then your purpose of life is missing. So these are 4 questions that can support you in reflecting as to what you need to do to get a better understanding of why you have been brought into this earth and how can you give your best to the most, in what manner. Okay, let us also find out what is your ethical, what is your ethical philosophy? So this is a question again. You work as a technician for a major car manufacturer and you discover that one of the development teams have installed software that incorrectly lowers the reading of noxious chemicals coming out of the exhaust when under test conditions. You decide to blow the whistle because now you have to take a choice. Which of the 3 choices you will take? Why will you want to blow the whistle? You have to blow the whistle. That you don't have a choice. But what is the reason that you think you would like to blow the whistle for? Choose 1, 2 and 3 or 3 and put it in the chat. What is your answer? Why would you blow the whistle? So all of you must write the answer on the chat. 1. 1 and 2. No, you have to choose only 1. Only you have to, yeah, 2. Great. And again, let me tell you, there is no wrong answer. All 3 no. You can't write all 3 no rather. You have to choose 1. That's the game. The game has rules. And let me tell you, none of you will be wrong. Okay. Yeah, others, just take your choice. And I've told you, none of you will be wrong. There's no right and wrong here. But you will get to know your own personal ethical philosophy. Where does it come from? Good. Okay. So here comes the answer. If you have written 1, it is just the wrong thing to do. You are principled conscious. You go by principles of life. If you write 2, you're social conscious. You're more worried about people and the impact things will happen on others. If somebody was to write 3, it is against the rule. That is also okay. You are rule compliance conscious. So, principle conscious is principle conscious guided by moral principles. Even if it did not harm anybody, if it was wrongly done, you would still report it. Social conscious is what is considered right or acceptable in a particular society. So today, all of us are talking about climate change and how it is impacting people. So you are social conscious. And rule and compliance is people with legal rights and duties who believe as long as it is legal, it is right. If we had lawyers in this, I'm sorry to say this, but if we had lawyers in this group, most of them would have written the third one. And again, nothing wrong about it. What we have found in the answers that we have received across the world, each of them is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 people have said principle conscious, 1/3 have said social conscious, and 1/3 have gone for rule compliance. Right? So this just gives us an idea of what kind of ethical philosophy we have. And this is the advanced journey, which is complicated. So I won't go too much into it, but I'll still put it slightly closer for you to understand. There are 8 integrated competencies of leadership in which we talk about it. We understand neuroscience. Basically, the neuroscience of instinct, neuroscience of how do we take decisions, managing the ego, the difference between intuition, instinct, and insight, ethical philosophy, personal conscience, self-determination, developing transpersonal leadership characteristics, choice, and going for the greater good beyond the ego. So I won't cover this, but the fact is that this is the second advanced phase, which can only happen after you've gone through the first phase. Great. So that brings us to the last slide that we have. It's our choice, Harry. That shows us what we truly are, far more than our abilities. So what we are today, we are much beyond that. And if we take the decisions to get better, we can go beyond what we are today and continuously grow and get better. So that brings us to this end of this journey. Any questions anybody has, I would love to answer that. Anyone who wants to know more about this, the book tells you a lot, but if you want to read the book and then discuss it with me, my details are given here and we can get connected to learn more together on this issue. Any questions anybody has, I would love to take. I've had a great time for these last 2 days. And thank you so much for being the people you are, because you are doing such